Elden Ring has a very colorful, sometimes, selection of weapons, from Reduvia to the Crystal Sword to the Lizard Greatsword, which is one of the only green weapons to the entire game. Although there are plenty of weapons that are very monotone, that are obviously just made of crude metals and shit, there are also a plethora of weapons, talismans, armor that are red, orange, all sorts of colors of the rainbow. Hence, the title of this video. I'm trying to make this sound interesting, if you can't tell. I hope I'm succeeding. Anyways, I will be beating Elden Ring with every color of the rainbow in one save file. Anyways, what that entails is that for the first run, or the first new game, or Journey 1 as it's called, I'll be beating the game with red. Only red items, red talismans, etc. For Journey 2 or New Game Plus, it'll be orange, and then yellow, green, blue, and purple, in that order. I will, however, be allowing myself to use most key items, meaning I'm not only going to be allowing myself to use healing flasks during red and only cerulean flasks during blue. I'm going to be able to use my flasks and the wondrous physics and any other key items that I need to progress the game. I will, however, be implementing a rule for specifically the wondrous physic, that being that I can only use a physic tier of the corresponding color. Meaning for red, I can use Moog's tier, and for orange, I can use the Fire Shredding Crack tier. Aside from that, that's basically the gist of it. As far as what weapons I'll be allowing myself to use, most of it will be up for interpretation, but I'll explain it more in depth as the video goes on. Anyways, without further ado, let's get on to Journey Red. I started this run by choosing the Bandit class, allowing me to wield Reduvia right off the bat. I tried to let Yura solo him, but he wasn't strong enough, so just this once, I had to let myself use a non-red weapon to truly start this run. Also, since I had access to bleed, I used Reduvia to kill Grail for some extra runes. And since I have a good weapon and extra levels, I decided to defeat Margit, Godric, and Radahn, who all went down pretty easily. I didn't have much of a strategy, mainly just relying on the Ash of War for maximum bleed. Because I used the Reduvia's Ash of War so much, I wanted to use the Ash of War of other weapons along Journey 1. After defeating Radahn, I killed Alexander for the Warrior Jar Shard for an extra 10% to my Ashes of War. Which brings me to one of the first rules of this run. Some talismans and weapons have multiple colors, so if I used a talisman for red, like the Warrior Jar Shard, I couldn't use it for yellow, even though the talisman has red and yellow colors. I have to pick which one I consider fits that color or which one is more prominent. After defeating DTS, Red Wolf, and Renala, I progressed Yura's questline and acquired the Moog tier and my next weapon, Eleonora's Pole Blade, which brings up another point. Not exactly a rule, but an objective. For each run, there was two things I wanted to do. I wanted to make the best build I could with the tools at my disposal, while also trying to use as much of a variety as I could. And I wanted to cheese Gideon because he sucks, and I hate him, and he deserves every low effort strategy that I used. Anyways, I defeated Golden Godfrey and Morga, and I found out that neither of them really had any windows that allowed me to use the full Ash of War of Eleonora's Pole Blade. Meaning I had to rely on the weapon's pure DPS, especially for Golden Godfrey since he's immune to bleed. Also, while fighting Chimera Denial, I noticed something interesting. Bloodblade Dance deals enough poise damage that I can essentially stun lock both of the knights that Niall summons, allowing me to get rid of both of them and then just 1v1 Niall. Also, while fighting Okina for the Rivers of Blood, I thought that the same strategy might work against him, but he ended up dodging too much, meaning we probably weren't able to use Eleonora's Pole Blade to cheese Gideon. Even though I had the Rivers of Blood, I still wanted to use Eleonora's Pole Blade, and I also wanted to save some of my upgrade materials for other weapons further into this run. This won't be an issue in the New Game Plus and beyond because I got all the smithing and somber bell bearings, allowing me to upgrade literally any weapon I wanted. For Fire Giant, I had to solely rely on bleed because Eleonora's Pole Blade's damage is split between physical and fire damage, which Fire Giant is resistant to. So I just wailed on his ankle, resulting in the fight lasting 6 whole fucking minutes. God, I hate this boss. After that, I finally killed Esger for the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, increasing all my damage by 20% after getting a bleed proc, something I really wish I did sooner, but I digress. Which brings me to the main theme of this build, Ashes of War and Bleed. All but one of the weapons that I used in Journey 1 have blood loss buildup, meaning I can make a decent bleed build since all the bleed weapons that I used, as well as Lord of Blood's Exaltation, are red. This synergy between weapons, spells, and talismans is something I try to achieve with every color build in this video. At this point, I finally acquired my first armor set. I won't be using this for very long, but I'll use it again for orange whenever we get there, but it has a decent amount of red in it, so I decided to go for it. Next, I used Rivers of Blood against Malekith. Malekith is a pretty quick boss, meaning I could only use the first part of Corpse Piler, aside from a couple openings allowing me to use the second part of the Ash of War. After defeating Malekith, I got the Crimson Amber Medallion plus 2, increasing my vigor by 8%. And for Gideon, I didn't really have a plan, I just spammed Corpse Piler, and it worked, shredding his health while barely giving him a chance to fight back, as it should. Piece of shit. Also, at some point, I ended up putting Radahn's helmet on because it has the big poofy red plume thingamajigger. Godfrey was pretty self-explanatory, using the same strategy against Malekith, only using the first part of the Ash of War to maximize damage windows. Next was Redagon / Elden Beast, which was actually pretty easy. On one hand, they're immune to bleed, but Rivers of Blood deals fire damage, which they're weak to. Also, at the beginning of both phases, they both don't attack for a while, allowing me to get all 3 parts of Corpse Piler off for a lot of early damage. Next was Moog, another situation where I had to rely on bleed, because while Moog is very susceptible to bleed, he's also resistant to fire damage. Luckily, I'm able to use the Moog tier, allowing me to negate his phase transition, again leaning on my Ash of War to maximize damage. I don't think I've ever said maximize this much in my entire life. Afterwards, I tried to fight Melania, but struggled a bit, often getting caught in Waterfall Dance if I got even the slightest bit too ambitious with Corpse Piler. So I decided to get well prepared for Melania by entering the DLC. The 2 next staples of this build were the next 2 talismans I obtained, the Crimson Amber Medallion plus 3, increasing my vigor by 10%, and the Crimson Seed Talisman plus 1, increasing my flask restoration by 30%. Next boss was the Divine Beast Dancing Lion, who either had long combos or damage windows long enough that I consistently was able to get 2 parts of Corpse Piler off, making this a pretty easy fight. Also, he's weak to fire damage. Also, the Golden Hippopotamus went down pretty easily, mainly because it's one of the slower bosses in the DLC. Now it was time to acquire the second to last weapon of this run, Rakshasa's Great Katana, which was actually a pain in the ass to get. Most of the DLC and PC boss fights are so tanky, they go on for so long, and it becomes this whole game of baiting specific attacks, only being able to get like 1 or 2 hits in every once in a while. Oh yeah, also I got Rakshasa's armor set, with each piece increasing my damage by 2%. This is when I found out that Weed Cutter is really good against Melania, either interrupting her or hyper-armoring through her attacks, making both phase 1 and 2 of this fight a cakewalk. And then I had a plan. I wanted to use Rakshasa's Great Katana and one other weapon for the rest of Journey 1, the Blasphemous Blade, which means I needed to fight Rykard without Serpent Hunter, and I needed another talisman to replace Lord of Blood's Excitation when I'm using Blasphemous Blade. So I got the Fire Prelate's armor because it has the highest fire resistance of any armor set in the game, and I got the Red Feathered Branch Sword, raising my attack by 20% when I'm at less than 20% HP. And Rakshasa's Great Katana is the best option I could have asked for against Rykard. Not only can you spam the Ash of War and shred his health bar, but it also has enough hyper armor that I don't get staggered by the lava surrounding him, meaning I can just spam the skill until I either run out of stamina or run out of FP. Also, at this point, this is when me and my friend Anthony got on a call together and kind of just hung out playing Elden Ring.
But when I'm doing New Game Plus, you don't have to open it because you already have that talisman pouch. So you don't have to talk to him at all. Fudge, I went the wrong way. How to fight him? Whatever his name, the ghost of whatever his name is, Godfrey. You tell me one of these guys' knives could almost one-tap me?
And it was at this point that I realized the true potential of Weed Cutter, and to really show its raw strength, here's my first unedited attempt against Rallana.
So, level up Vega, only needs to be set small HP. So, just do Arcane, I guess.
That being said, I actually had more issues with Putrescent Knight than Rallana, and that's mainly due to a skill issue on my part, He's such a glass cannon of a boss that he usually just bulldoze through him on normal playthrough. But on playthroughs where I'm restricted on what I'm able to use, he really becomes a threat that I actually have to take seriously. Next is by far my favorite boss of the entire DLC, Midra. Midra is a very agile boss with long combos, but he also has damage windows long enough that I could utilize the Ash of War with little to no punishment. He's also a boss with a scripted boss entrance, allowing me to deal massive damage at the beginning of each attempt. Next was Bale, a boss that I actually opted to use damage methods aside from just spamming the Ash of War, mainly due to his weakness to pierce damage. And the running light attack and the standard heavy attack of Rakshasa's Great Katana both deal pierce damage. By utilizing these attacks, it felt like I was really getting the hang of Bale, even though this boss really tested me, showing me how unfamiliar I was with Bale's moveset. Now it was time to use the Blasphemous Blade, specifically against all the bosses weak to fire. This includes the Shadow Tree Avatar, Commander Gaius, and Ramana. And as you could have guessed, this weapon's Ash of War is overpowered, allowing me to make quick work of all of these bosses, taking minimal effort to achieve victory. Now we just gotta burn the Sealing Trail, and I forgot to fight Mesmer. How did I forget him? I literally have a statue of him behind me. Anyways, it was at this point that I was starting to debate on whether or not I wanted to use Flame Grant Me Strength for Journey 1 or Journey 2, since it has this red-orange hue to it, making it really uncertain on which color to categorize it in. I ended up allowing myself to use it in Journey 1 for a few reasons. One, the aura around you when you use Flame Grant Me Strength is very red rather than red-orange, unlike the incantation's icon. Two, for orange we have a different buffing incantation that isn't compatible with Flame Grant Me Strength, but we'll get to that once we get to Journey 2. Three, I just wanted to use it because I don't want to spend 3 hours fighting Promise Consort Radahn. Also, I used the Dragon Communion Steel because it's red. Okay, I know Mesmer is resistant to fire, but for whatever reason, I just used Blasphemous Blade against him, but it only took me 2 tries, so moving on. Before facing PCR, I had to defeat Leda and her minions, and I was also hoping that Weed Cutter would cheese them, but it didn't really shine until Nantan, or whatever the fuck his name is, joined the fight. And now, it was time for Consort Radahn. My successful attempt was actually incredibly close. Even though I played things safe using Taker's Flame sparingly, mainly relying on the DPS of the weapon alone, getting 1 or 2 swings in at a time, in the end, with no flasks, a sliver of health, and a little bit of greed, we pulled through. We officially beat Journey 1 with only red. Now, the pacing of the rest of this video is gonna change a little bit, mainly because instead of gathering all the items along the way, I grabbed everything I needed for the following color before entering the next New Game cycle. For each New Game Plus, I'll be listing everything I gathered even if it never got used, that way I can more easily call back to it, and also to give anyone who wants to complete this challenge a clear idea of what their options are. For Journey Orange, as I'll call it, I literally just thought of this as I'm writing the script. Here's a list of everything I gathered for the rest of the run. Burn of Flame, Catch Flame, Flame Sling, Scarlet Aeonium, Howl of Shibriri, Flame of Frenzy, Talisman of the Dread, Faithful Canvas Talisman, Magma Blade, Flame of the Fell God, Flame Drake Talisman +3, Fire Scorpion Charm, Radagon Icon, Giant's Flame Take Thee, Flame Fall Upon Them, the Giant Seal, and the Flame Shrouding Crack Tier. If you haven't noticed already, the main theme of this is Pyromancy. The specific set of talismans takes best advantage of the incantation Catch Flame, as it's the most spammable, specifically because of Radagon's icon. As support, I have the Magma Blade boosted by the Talisman of Dread, and then we have Scarlet Aeonia because Scarlet Rod is just neat. Before we enter the boss rush section of this video, I use Fire Shrouding Crack Tier and the Howl of Shibriri before every boss fight as my buffing routine. Anyways, Margit went down pretty easily to Magma Blade, getting stance broken while sitting in the magma, quite literally incinerating him. Godric was also no problem, because during his phase transition, he stands completely still, allowing me to literally melt him. I think literally is going to be the new word that I overuse a lot. For Renala, I use Magma Blade as backup while point blank nuking her in the face with Giant's Flame Take Thee. For DTS, I wanted to test out the most optimal build for Journey Orange, Catch Flame, and it was really effective. I was able to delete about 40% of his HP before he even started moving, allowing me to shred the rest of his HP once he started his phase transition, allowing me to shred the rest of his health once he started his phase transition, only finishing him off with Magma Blade because I ran out of FP. For Radahn, I used Magma Blade again, and although it wasn't as effective as it was against Margit and Godric, since Radahn moves around a lot, I was still able to skip phase 2. For Golden Godfrey, I used Catch Flame. Reason being is that Catch Flame is one of the few incantations that has a jumping attack, allowing me to have more damage windows while also dealing more damage than if I used Magma Blade. For Margit, I started the fight by nuking him with Scarlet Aeonia, and then buffing during the Sword Thumb attack. After that, I used Magma Blade to get full utility out of the chip damage from both Scarlet Rot and the Magma. For Fire Giant, I did the same. He has a huge health bar, and Scarlet Rot will make dealing damage to him way easier as it takes his health down by a percentage rather than a flat damage amount. And then it was just a matter of poking him in the foot till he died. At first, I tried the same strat against Moog, however, he doesn't really have any moves allowing me to get Scarlet Aeonia off. Meaning, in the end, I ditched the idea and just used Magma Blade until he perished. Also, really random, this is the first time I've ever died during this parkour segment. On the plus side, the strat was pretty effective against Godskin Duo, allowing me to rout one and then kill the other while Banal kept him busy. For Malekith, I again used the Magma Blade, but this time I waited until phase 2 to put Scarlet Rot on him, allowing me to quickly end his second phase. Because I wanted to cheese Gideon and I wanted a couple more spells that I hadn't acquired yet, I went and picked up Frenzied Burst and Unendurable Frenzy. I used Frenzied Burst to snipe Gideon from the other side of the arena, and for Unendurable Frenzy, my idea was that during Godfrey's pseudo-phase transitions in phase 1 and phase 2, I was going to use Unendurable Frenzy while he was standing still. This ended up not working for pretty obvious reasons, but this incantation comes into play later on. Anyways, I ended up using Catch Flame against Godfrey for the same reasons stated earlier, while occasionally using Frenzied Burst while he ripped the ground apart. For Radagon, I'll let the footage speak for itself. Before he even gets to move, he's at half health. Needless to say, Catch Flame is a very good incantation and this build is perfect for it. For Elden Beast, I used Unendurable Frenzy for a huge damage while he was doing his breath attack, taking about a fourth of his HP. After that, I used Magma Blade to stance break him, that way I can use Unendurable Frenzy a second time to take a second chunk out of his health, leaving him with about 10% HP. And after that, I just finished him off with Catch Flame. And now it's time to head to the DLC. Starting off the Bind Beast Dancing Lion was a piece of cake. Given its weakness to fire, just use Catch Flame until it's dead. For R'Lana, it was the same thing, although to my surprise, despite R'Lana being a quick boss, I was able to consistently get 2 Catch Flames off during her damage windows, although sometimes I got punished for it. Dancing Hippo also went down no problem to Catch Flame. Mesmer, however, was a tough one. At first I wanted to use Catch Flame, but it did hardly any damage due to his fire resistance. And it was to the point where, even though each attempt was 2 to 3 minutes at a time, I still didn't deal enough damage to get him to phase 2. So I tried using a different incantation, and it kinda worked. I was dealing more damage per damage window, but Giant's Flame Take Thee leaves a bellow of smoke every time you cast it that blocked my view, often getting me killed because I couldn't see what was coming. So I went back to my roots of the beginning of Journey Orange, using Magma Blade, hoping that the physical damage it dealt would make the boss easier, and it did. Finally besting Mesmer after spending a good hour or 2 running in headfirst for minutes at a time. While you watch me play in the background, I wanted to tell you that it was around this point that I decided to respec my character. After looking at my stats, mainly invested in Faith, I realized that Magma Blade's damage was lacking, with barely any extra scaling in either the physical or fire damage. So I invested 80 strength to get the most out of the weapon's damage, resulting in me not having enough faith to cast Howl of Shabriri. So for the next 3 fights, that being the Shadow Tree Avatar, Ramana, and Leda and her allies, would all be done with the Magma Blade, now boasting a higher DPS, but I'm unable to use Howl of Shabriri. And I'm not entirely sure while I did this, I actively wanted to use different incantations and not just the same stuff over and over again, although this might be due to the time crunch that I'm under. As of the time of recording the footage for this video, it's about halfway through June. I have 4 more colors to beat, and I felt a heavy amount of stress due to taking half of the month to get a third of the way through this challenge. And as of writing the script, it's June 28th, and as of recording the script, it's June 29th. I'm still trying to be as in-depth as possible, but I hope that my lack of time doesn't result in a bad video. So if you're enjoying the video so far, please consider subscribing. Especially if you want to see me beat the game with all the other colors, which will also be on the save file. Anyways, for Console Radon, I respect my character again, giving myself as much vigor and as much faith as I could, and completely relying on Catch Flame as my main source of damage. And it worked. Even though Radon has very tight dodge and damage windows, I was able to get 2 to 4 casts off depending on what move he did next. And after about half an hour of trying, he had been defeated. And now it was cleanup time. The bosses up next were Placidusax, who I needed for a remembrance weapon, Melania because at this point I made an effort to beat her in every journey, and Gaius because, if I'm being perfectly honest, I just completely forgot about him. For Placidusax, I used Flamefall upon them while the lightning fell because Placidusax is a large boss, allowing most of the fire pellets to hit him for good damage. After the lightning stopped, I used Unendurable Frenzy, which would usually result in a stance break, allowing me to get a second one off, leaving him at less than half health. After he flies around and teleports around for a bit, I used Flamefall upon them until he flew down for the last time to do his laser attack. Also, can we just appreciate for a second how goated the pyromancy names are in this game? Giant's Flame Take Thee, Flamefall upon them, these are just some of the most metal names of all time. Anyways, after he crashes down for the last time and he does his laser attack, I used Unendurable Frenzy to finish him off. Next was Loretta, which I kinda wish I used a different incantation for, mainly because she moves around a lot, resulting in Flame upon them dealing mediocre damage, mainly because all of the little pellets often miss. Next was Melania. At the start of the battle, since she just edge walks toward you, I'm able to snipe her from afar using Frenzied Burst, until she gets right up to my face, allowing me to get a chunk of her health out of the way before switching to Catch Flame. Anytime she'd get remotely far away though, I'd take full advantage of it, sniping her from afar until she closed the distance or initiated Waterfall Dance. In phase 2, I used Frenzied Burst to snipe her in her flower, and then used Unendurable Frenzy after it dissipated, allowing for massive damage because this incantation just straight up stun locks her. And then after using Catch Flame until she uses Scarlet Ionia again, I attempted to stun lock her again, but was unable to because her move select made her use a move that has enough hyper armor to just poise through it, causing me to retreat and go back to Catch Flame. And after a little bit of whittling, Melania had no defeat. Next was Gaius, pretty self-explanatory. Use Catch Flame until he's dead, I know, kind of anticlimactic, but don't worry about it, look at how these creepy little fucks are stuck in the ground. If anybody knows why this is happening, please comment. I'm very curious. Holy shit, this is a long list. Anyways, we're on Journey Yellow now, and the tools at our disposal are Millicent's Prosthesis, the Draconic Tree Sentinel armor set, aside for the gauntlets, which are the Clean Rot gauntlets because DTS gauntlets aren't yellow. We have 2 Sacred Relic Swords, Death Knight's Twin Axes, Golden Arcs, Bolt Drake Talismans +3, Erdtree Heal, Dryleaf Seal, Barbed Staff Spear, Land of Shadow, Great Sword of Damnation, Multi-Layered Ring of Light, Euporium, Lettuce Sword, Prosthesis Wearer's Heirloom, Ornament Straight Sword and Golden Breeze Crest Shield, Holy Scorpion Charm, Golden Scarab, Wing Sword Insignia, Lightning Scorpion Charm, Outer God Heirloom, Blessed Dew Talisman, Two Finger Heirloom, the Faith, Strength, and Dex Not Crystal Tier. Also, I don't know when I got the Dex tier, and it's not worth looking for the footage. The Axe of Godric, Light of Mikola, Dragon King's Cragblade, Golden Vow, the Holy and Lightning Shredding Crag Tier, Golden Halberd, Protection of the Erdtree, Wrath of Gold, Triple Rings of Light, Heal from Afar, Knight's Lightning Spear, Death Knight's Longshaft Axe, Erdtree Heal, and also I got the Golden Order Seal at some point, but again, I don't know when I got it, and I'm not going to look through 100 hours of footage just to find a single item, so cut me some slack. And lastly, the Circuit of Light. Also, just like Journey Orange and Journey Yellow, I'll always use Golden Vow, and I always have either the Holy or Lightning Shrouding Crack tier, depending on which damage type I'm using. Also, the main themes of this run is that I have a lot of flexibility with stats, lightning and holy damage, and successive attacks. Although the first isn't really all that helpful considering I'm almost level 200 at this point, meaning I have enough for 60 vigor, 80 faith, and the rest invested in intelligence since I have the Golden Order seal. For Margit, I basically just nuked him using the Light of Mikola, and for Godric, I did the same while also using Multi-Layered Ring of Light. For Renala, because her second phase is in water, I used Knight's Lightning Spear to take full advantage of my build, and since she doesn't dodge around or anything like that, it was a really easy win. For Radon, I used Land of Shadow when he was far away, allowing me to set up damage, while I used Multi-Layered Ring of Light as my main source of damage. For DTS, I wanted to try out Wrath of Gold. I also nuked him with the Light of Mikola for free damage. I also found out that the Wrath of Gold does enough stagger damage to almost stun lock DTS, making this a really easy fight. For Golden Godfrey and Morgan, I also started the fight with the Light of Mikola for free damage, and I used the Knight's Lightning Spear since they're both weak to lightning. For Fire Giant, I used Triple Rings of Light, Multi-Layered Ring of Light, and Lane of Shadow. I used Lane of Shadow because the Fire Giant moves around a lot, and the Bolt of Light have homing, meaning I could cast it and just get a few easy 1000 damage in. I didn't use Triple Rings very much, even though I thought it would be really good because the Fire Giant is a big target, but I mainly just used Multi-Layered Ring of Light when he stood still. Also, I forgot to get the Star Scourge heirloom, so I got it just now. That way I can use Euphoria without having to respec my character, and also mainly just as an excuse to use any of the heirloom talismans. Euphoria is probably the staple weapon of Journey Yellow, just like Catch Flame and Journey Orange, able to take full advantage of 3 talismans while also dealing more holy damage and powering itself up with successive attacks as the weapon's gimmick. This is especially apparent the more the weapon glows. Euphoria being a quick weapon and also just having a really good build for it resulted in a really easy win against the Godskin duo. For Malekith, I tried to use Euphoria, but he is really high holy resistant, which made it really difficult, making this fight drag on way more than it needed to. So I ended up switching to the Death Knight's Twin Axis to get past Malekith's holy resistance while also utilizing successive attacks. And for Gideon, we have by far my new favorite way of cheesing him, by turning him into a literal shish kebab with the Great Sword of Damnation, whose Ash of War skewers NPC enemies. I genuinely cried tears of joy as I shoved my blade through him from mouth to taint, only to gruesomely rip it out and do it again and again and again until not even the all-knowing had any idea what hit him or stabbed him. I think I blacked out for a second. Anyways, for Godfrey, I used 2 Sacred Relic swords to get the most out of jump attacks, as well as to easily get boosted damage from successive attacks. And with how many hours I have in Elden Ring Night Rain, running Power Stance, Great Swords, and Wilder, this was a piece of cake. I was in my element. He never stood a chance. God, I sound like such a prick saying that. For Radagon and Elden Beast, I used Dragon King's Cragblade, using the Ash of War for free damage in the beginning of both phases, and relying on light pokes to build up successive attacks, and then after getting the buff from successive attacks, using heavy attacks to maximize damage. And now I'm saying maximize again. And Elden Beast went down pretty easily because of the water. For the Retta, I got kinda lucky. I used the same strat that I did in Elden Beast, but with the Bolt of Grand Sex, using light pokes to get the damage buff, and then heavy attacks for true damage. And when I say I got lucky, I mean I accidentally just pushed her into a corner when I just staggered her repeatedly, and then finished the fight with Aura. For Melania, my initial plan didn't work as well as I thought it would, at least in Phase 2. For Phase 1, I could just use the Bolt of Grand Sex from the other side of the arena without many issues. The problems, however, started in Phase 2. I needed a lot of FP to make one strat work, and was unable to use the strat in Phase 2 because she charges at you, acting way more aggressive than Phase 1. So after a while of trying to make this work, I opted to use the double Sacred Relic Sword build again, allowing for more damage as well as some good staggers that made this way easier than just trying to cheese her. And of course, I have to end it with the crit. For Moog, I wanted to use Euphoria because I thought I had the potential to face skip him. I wasn't able to, mainly because I couldn't stagger him before his knee heal attack, but as stated before, the Euphoria is the best weapon for this build, so it made pretty quick work of Moog, even if it didn't completely cheese him. For the Divine Beast Dancing Lion, there isn't much to say, I just used Euphoria. It's really good. Rolana, on the other hand, was a pain in my ass, mainly because of the weapon I decided to use, the Death Knight's Long Shaft Axe. This thing is ass. I had good stats for damage, and I had plenty of moments to deal good damage with the Ash of War. But for a lightning weapon, this should have been way better than it was. The only reason why my winning attempt was the winning one was because I got a lucky stagger and the fact that I'm pretty good at this boss. Without that, this boss would have been a complete nightmare. I almost wanted to change builds, but this was the last lightning weapon against the last boss that's weak to lightning, so I sucked it up and eventually won. For Gaius, I used Let Sword, which took some getting used to, but it did a really good job at building up successive attacks consistently with both light and heavy attacks. I've just never used a light greatsword before, so I had to adjust to how many times I could attack during damage windows. Aside from that, it was pretty easy. For Betressant Knight, I used the Barbed Staff Spear, mainly because of the Ash of War. It sent out multiple arcs for a really long time, meaning that during his phase transition, if I did correctly, I could obliterate his health bar. This didn't work as well as I would have liked it to, But I found out that I also could use the Ash of War after he does the triple spin attack where he jumps off the horse and turns into a fucking Beyblade. And eventually, after banging my head against the wall until I got good RNG, this happened. Yeah, I died, but it died first, and the game counted it, so I won. For Mesmer, I used America's Hammer, which in hindsight is really fucked up, but I digress. I was surprised at how much stance damage this weapon did, especially with how fast of a weapon it is. Also, this weapon has one of my favorite Ashes of War on it, and even if I didn't first try Mesmer, I would have had fun either way. For Ramana, I used the double-staked Relic Sword build again, and for Leda and for allies, I used the Greatsword Detonation. God, I love this weapon. And for my magnum opus of yellow builds, I got a second Euphoria against Consort Radahn. This build was really good, absolutely bullying phase 1, especially since he's weak to holy damage. Even in phase 2, the damage was really good, sometimes dealing 2,000 to 3,000 damage in a single jump attack. And now I was on to Journey Green, and again, the pacing of this video is going to change. It was about June 20th by the time that I got to Green, and I decided to only fight the required bosses, aside from Renala so I could respec my character. I didn't use a variety of strategies, just picking one and sticking with it for the rest of the run. So I'm going to give a brief play-by-play of the strategy that I used for all the bosses, and how the video plays out will be based entirely on how I decided to edit it together. Also, I'll tell you how I cheese Gideon. Highlight of any playthrough is treating Gideon like my personal plaything. Anyways, for Journey Green, I used leather armor. Yes, that's my only piece of armor. Green Burst Crystal Tear, Lacerating Cross Tree, Retaliatory Cross Tree, Venomous Fang, the Poison Flower Blooms Twice, Giant's Hunt, Lizard Greatsword, Two-Handed Turtle Talisman, Viridian Amber Medallion +3, and the Green Spell Crystal Tear. The main theme for this build, technically, is that I have all the stamina and stamina regen in the world. But unlike every other run, the weapons at my disposal, the Lizard Greatsword and the Venomous Fang, were infeasible. Meaning I could do whatever I wanted. However, because one of my options has innate poison buildup, specifically deadly poison, I decided to do an arcane dex build, putting the Poison Flower Blooms Twice Ash of War on the Venomous Fangs and giving it a poison attunement. That way I can have poison and rot on one weapon, allowing me to detonate both the poison and the rot for extra damage, or allowing me to proc both rot and poison on the same boss at once and just letting the damage tick down passively. Also, because the Venomous Fang already has specifically deadly poison on it, if you give it the poison attunement, it'll deal the damage of deadly poison, but the poison will last long as regular poison. For the Lizard Greatsword, I gave it Giant's Hunt for no reason other than it's a thrusting attack. And I gave it the Blood Attunement because both the Tongue Spear thing and the actual sword itself deal bleed damage when you do a charge attack. I didn't really utilize either of the cross tree talismans, opting to use charge attacks rather than running or roll attacks because they provided more bleed buildup. As far as strategy goes, if the boss was susceptible to rot or poison, I would usually apply poison with Venomous Flame, explode the poison with the Ash of War, and then continue using the Ash of War until they got rot. This strategy was really only good for the base game because many of the DLC bosses are too quick or move around too much to be able to rot them, so I often just poisoned them and then detonated it if I had the chance. After the boss was rotted and or poisoned, I would use the Lizard Greatsword as my main source of damage, regardless of if the boss was susceptible to bleed. And because stamina was never a problem, stance damage often carried a boss fight even without bleed. And for Gideon, I ended up getting Wild Strikes and just swung wildly until he perished. For Journey Blue, I had Rock Blaster, Loretta's Mastery, Magic Glint Blade and Carrying Greatsword, Glintstone Stars and Night Shard, Renala's Full Moon, Magic Striding Crack Tear, Cerulean Amber Medallion +3, Cerulean Sea Talisman +1, Cerulean Hidden Tear, Loretta's Bow, Carrying Phalanx, Carrying Retaliation, Glintstone's Ice Crag and Freezing Mist, Magic Scorpion Charm, Comet, Graven Skull Talisman, Graven Mask Talisman, Carrying Glintstone Staff, Night Comet, Comet Azure, Lusat's Glintstone Staff, Beloved Stardust, and the Black Knife Armor Set, and the Navy Hood. Also, the Black Knife set isn't super blue, but the whole thing has like this blue tint to it, so I used the entire set aside from the helmet, of course. For Journey Blue, my strategy was basically use Renala's Moon for the magic debuff and then spam either Comet or Carrion Slicer depending on my distance. I mostly use Carrion Slicer though, pretty simple. The only time that I ended up using a different strategy was against Commander Nile, and this is because he takes about 15 seconds to summon 2 Banished Knights. This gives... This gives me the opportunity to shred about 3/4 of his health with Comet Azure, which means that he immediately phase transitions and I don't have to worry about the stupid fucking Knights. Also, I don't know why the fuck I did this, but I just used Carrion Slicer to kill Gideon. I didn't use Night Comet, even though I went out of my way to get that specifically for Gideon. However, I did end up using that against Letta and her allies, so it got a use against NPCs. For Journey Purple, I had Gravitational Missile, Blades of Stone, Rotten Crystal Sword, which looks more brown when you're holding it, but the item photo in your inventory clearly shows it as being purple. Meteorite Staff, Rock Sling, Gravity Well, Margaret's Curse Sword, Velvet Sword of St. Trina Smile, and yes, St. Trina's Blossom is the only armor, with heavy quotations, that I have for purple, meaning I'm basically nude. Also, because I wanted to get this video out at least by the end of June, with it being Pride Month, I ended up only beating the base game with purple. I don't think I would have stood a chance if I tried to beat the DLC too. I'll probably finish that up in the next video. So if you haven't guessed already, it's not June. Obviously. But originally, I was going to do all 6 colors of the rainbow for Pride Month. And that didn't end up happening. I busted my ass for like 2/3 of the month because this took way longer than I thought it was going to. And on the very last day, I got like 60% of the way through. I had fully edited red, orange, yellow, and green, and all I had was blue and purple, and I was just tired. I couldn't do it anymore. So I said, fuck it. So now, instead of every color of the rainbow, it's just all the colors. So I'm not only going to be doing the base game, I'm going to be doing the DLC. And I'm still gonna only do the necessary bosses, just because I don't want this video to take 2 months to make. Although if it does, that's cool. And also because I kind of just want to move to the next colors, because I'm not super jazzed about the ones that I have now. That being purple and then eventually pink. So, but yeah. I thought I would clear that up because I recorded the script a week ago, and a week has gone by, and I'm at this point in the editing process, and it's you know, we're not in June anymore. We're about a week into July, so I thought I would just clear that up. Also, I'm not I don't feel super bad about just kind of yapping right now, just cause you guys are just watching me play in the background, so I'm pretty chill just yapping for a bit. But yeah, anyways, we'll get back to past Enoch, and he will explain to you the gist of my strategy, if you can even call it that. For Journey Purple, I didn't really use any spells, mainly because the staff I was stuck with only had 240 sorcery scaling, compared to Lusat's Glinso staff in Journey Blue, which had 450. I only used Blades of Stone against Gideon because his AI doesn't detect the spell. I assume because it's not technically a projectile. I only used Morgoth's Cursed Sword against Morgoth. Aside from that, my best and main option was to dual wield the Rotten Crystal Sword and the Velvet Sword of St. Trina. Aside from using Morgoth's Cursed Sword against Morgoth himself, the only time I noticed myself using Morgoth's Cursed Sword was really just to get a bleed proc. For Gideon, at first, I didn't think that I had a strategy for him, but after a little bit of experimenting, I eventually just spammed Blades of Chaos, and I think the reason why it works so well is because he doesn't see it as projectiles, so he can't detect it. So I'm able to just spam it from the other side of the arena, like Night Comet or Frenzied Burst. The only boss I actually had a strategy for was Radagon. I respec my character so that my strongest weapon was the Rotten Crystal Sword. I two-handed it until he got Scarlet Rot, and after that I dual-wielded the two straight swords for maximum DPS. And I fucking said maximum again. Also, I think it's funny that the gay Elden Ring run ended with 2 straight swords. Also, yeah, I know, the joke doesn't really make sense. I don't care. I'm keeping it in because I think it's fucking hilarious. For Letta and her allies, I basically just spammed Gravitational Missile and Blades of Stone and basically had to rely entirely on RNG, just praying to God that they would get stun locked enough that they would just die and they wouldn't just like completely obliterate me. Consort Radahn is probably the boss that gave me the most trouble throughout this entire run. For starters, I didn't have any armor, meaning that if I slightly mistimed a dodge in his second phase, I would just get completely obliterated, even though I have 80 vigor. The complete and utter lack of armor and any defensive talismans just made this entire fight a complete nightmare. I had hardly any DPS, I only had one rotten sword, meaning I could only give him Scarlet Rot in phase 1, and it was almost impossible to do it in phase 2, and even if I was able to do it in phase 2, if I messed up a single dodge, I had to do the entire fight all over again. So because using the Rotten Crystal Sword and the Velvet Sword of St. Trina wasn't working, I decided to use a weapon that I've pretty much ignored this entire run, that being Morgott's Curse Sword. It felt a little bit better. The two main differences between this and dual-wielding straight swords was that I was doing more stance damage and I had bleed. And although the stance damage and the bleed buildup was nice, it didn't make up for the fact that it made it almost impossible to quickly and consistently get a decent way through the fight before just dying. And although initially I wasn't going to get a second Rotten Crystal Sword, I ended up getting one anyways because I had to go to the Helic Tree so we could get a talisman for Journey Pink. And if you want to see the second half of me beating Elden Ring with every color on one save file, please consider subscribing. Anyways, now that I had two Rotten Crystal Swords, it made it way easier to rot Radahn in phase 1, and it also made it possible to rot him in phase 2. And because the Rotten Crystal Sword just was my more damaging weapon between the two swords that I had, it also meant that my DPS without the Scarlet Rot was just better. This made it way easier to have not just consistent DPS, but also to get through the fight faster and not have to deal with as much bullshit. And this strategy of having two rot weapons that do better DPS than the Velvet Sword of St. Trina ended up being the strategy, if you can even call it that got me the win against this outrageous boss. Hopefully, I hope to God that Pink is better, because I have Rotten Wind Sword Insignia, I have Rot, and I have a hammer that has really good strength and arcane scaling, and also has a debuff. So like I should be doing decent damage all around, so fucking pray for me. Anyways, that is beating Elden Ring with every color of the rainbow on one save file. I genuinely hope you enjoy this video. I've spent roughly a month and a half or so, depending on when I finish editing this video, and as I explained earlier, this was supposed to be a video for Pride Month, but we're over halfway through July, so, you know, obviously that's not gonna happen. If you made it this far, as I said before, I hope you enjoy. I hope that Pride Month was a grand time for you and that you enjoyed it far better than I did, because I had a bunch of drama going on in the background because people are being homophobic. And to all my queer viewers, if there are any, to all my non-binaries, to all my she, he's, and theys, I genuinely hope that this video gave you joy. You deserve all the joy of the world. And again, if you want to see more of this, I'm going to be doing pink, brown, black, gray, and white. Also on this save file. And hopefully, everything after pink, because pink is going to be the first one, hopefully everything after that is way better. And again, if there's any runs, any weapons, Ash of Wars, things like that you want me to do like a dedicated build towards, I'll do it. I need ideas. Give me your ideas. Tell me what you want and I will just do it because I want to, and I love this game and I like having fun. Even though purple fucking sucked. Anyways, enough yapping. I will hopefully see you in the next video. Goodbye.